Hey guys, Lonnie, Real Alcoholic. The last video I wasn't paying attention, it cut off on us. But let's review this step 3 prayer on page 63, and then we'll start getting into step 4. We're going to start preparing ourselves for step 4. It says we were now at step 3. Okay, we had talked about using our own wording as long as we got these ideas voiced uh, without reservation, right? And so, what are these ideas, man? First, God, I offer myself to thee to build with me and do with me as thou wilt. Okay, very first thing, man, from the beginning is I want this higher power. I'm offering myself that this higher power, I'm going to quit playing God. And that even includes my own growth in this program. That even includes my personality changes that are about to come up in the future, because we will have some personality changes, right? I just want to sit here in this third step prayer and be a blank slate, man. Just a lump of clay, and let the potter do what the potter does best. Turn me into whatever the potter wants me to be. Man, some of us are made to be vases where we're going to hold some beautiful flowers, right? Some of us might be some coffee cups or some dishes. I don't know. Some of us might be used for other purposes that are not so extravagant or eloquent. But the idea is I want to be a blank slate. I want to offer myself, my heart, my mind, over to this higher power and see what comes up in the future. I have left my old ideas behind, and so we're going to let God do with us whatever God wants to do with us. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Okay, so we're going to stop doing our will. We need to do God's will. And we've had problems doing that because we have this bondage of self. And what is self? Self is driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, self-pity, etc., 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 etc. So we're going to ask God to remove these character defects. Once we get a good idea, of what they are, but for right now, we want to be relieved of this bondage of self so that we can have better relationship with our fellow man and with God. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, thy way of life. And on this last sentence, guys, I really want to point out, for me, this is like a contract, and I didn't look at it that way until a few times of failing in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I couldn't maintain sobriety. It says clearly, we're asking God to take away our difficulties, our bondage of self, our external circumstances that are very difficult, that we got ourselves in trouble due to our drinking and our personalities, okay? So we're going to ask God to take away these difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help. And I made the mistake, and I tell you guys a lot of times, man, my sole purpose for sobriety, my sole purpose for stopping drinking was for the job, for the relationship, for the family, for the house, for the car, for whatever, right? Whatever my goal was, if I had to quit drinking to attain that goal, well, that's what I would do. And I've seen it in myself, and I sure see it in others, is this contract. I like to call it a contract. I really don't like that word. I'm trying to find a different word. But it is a contract that our difficulties will be taken away. Okay, but there's one reason why they're taken away, is so that I could help others. And when my difficulties are taken away and I'm happy, joyous, and free, and I am not doing that strenuous, self sacrificing work that Bill W. talked about, if I'm just conveniently doing Alcoholics Anonymous, that's like a deal breaker, man. You know, I just stepped away from my contract. I'm not upholding my end of the bargain because, you know, I'm pretty desperate the first time I go through step 3, and man, I really want these difficulties taken away. And then all of a sudden they're taken away, and I start patting myself on the back like I did a really good job, you know, and I'm really somebody now, you know. I'm brushing my teeth on a regular basis. No, just joking. But for some of us, yeah, that's quite an accomplishment. But anyway, I get my difficulties taken away, and I don't use that freedom. I don't use the financial freedom. I don't use the spiritual freedom, the gift I've been given to face life on life's terms. All of these things that I had trouble accomplishing, that they're starting to come true, and I'm finding some peace. And if I don't use that to help others, that's a deal breaker, man. It really is. That is selfish within itself. I'm back in pride, thinking I've accomplished all these great things, just for me to have some pleasures in life. So I really wanted to point that out, you know, and there could be another reason why we think well before taking this step. That, you know, I need to be committed. That yes, when my difficulties are taken away, I'm committed to helping others. So that's a little recap of the ideas that we're talking about. Okay. And however a person words this, I've seen some real beautiful writings where people have done their own wording to this prayer. And I've seen some that were not quite so beautiful. People tried to write their own words, but they missed these ideas that we were talking about. And so I wanted to go over this one more time before we get into step 4, because we're going to get into this part about taking away our difficulties and relieving us from the bondage of self. We are about to see exactly what self is when we get into this 4th step. We are about to see exactly what has blocked our relationship with our fellow human beings and with God. We are about to see why we could not find peace and comfort in this life. And in order to do that, I need to be a blank slate. I need to offer myself to the Spirit of the universe and to God and become a little bit teachable. So we did that. We said our 3rd step prayer. Next, we launched out on a course of vigorous action. The first step of which is a personal house cleaning, which many of us never attempted. Though our decision, being the 3rd step, was a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and to be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us. Blocking us. Blocking us from what? Blocking us from the sunlight of the Spirit. Blocking us from God. Blocking us from finding peace in this life. Blocking us from having healthy, meaningful relationships. So our liquor was but a symptom, it says. We had to get down to causes and conditions. Very important, very important. Our liquor was but a symptom. So the alcohol is not a problem. The alcohol is the symptom of our disease. If I get a cold and I sneeze, the sneezing's not the problem. The problem is I got something going on internally in my body. So the same with the alcohol. Our liquor was but a symptom. And I can promise you guys, we talked about untreated alcoholism a couple pages back. You know, a lot of us will quit drinking and we still exhibit some symptoms of untreated alcoholism. And I'm going to tell you what those are. Not only is it the anger, not only is it the fear, not only is it the irritableness, but we might start exhibiting behaviors sexually that we've never done before. We might start exhibiting behaviors concerning food that we've never done before. We might start doing other abnormal behaviors that are not, let's just say, not quite productive, not really productive to our spiritual growth. Okay, those are all symptoms too. And so my liquor was only just a symptom, showing me that there was some internal stuff going on. And so I had to get down to the causes and conditions. I mean, if I treat an illness, yes, I got the symptoms, but if I don't find out what's causing these symptoms, I stay sick. And so we have to get down to causes and conditions. And this is what we're going to do on a step 4. Therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. Okay, so we're going to start on this step 4. And this step 4 has really gotten confused, man, over the years. It's not an autobiography. It's not it's not psychological therapy. We're on a fact-facing and fact-finding process. No different than I've got a list of items on a piece of paper and I go into a warehouse or I go through a supermarket to do an inventory. I check off what's there. If something's outdated, if it's bad, I simply get rid of it. There's nothing more to it than that. Sometimes we can get emotional talking about some of these things in our past, okay? That's understandable. But that is not what we're looking for. We are looking for causes and conditions. We're looking for facts as to what makes up my selfishness. Why am I having trouble finding peace in this life? So kind of like a business inventory, we're going to do exactly the same thing with our lives. We're going to take stock honestly. Okay, very first thing we're going to do on this 4th step. Okay, the first thing we did on the 3rd step, there was a first requirement that we quit playing God. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do on this 4th step is we're going to search out the flaws in our makeup which caused our failure. Being convinced that self, manifested in various ways, was what had defeated us, we considered its common manifestations. Okay, let's stop right there before we go any further. At this point, this is where my sponsor started really digging into our character defects. What are they and what do they look like? Common manifestations. That would be, how do they manifest themselves in my life? Okay. What is I had to understand the difference between envy and jealousy. Okay. 2 different things there. I had to understand some of these terms before we got into them. So what we did at this point, okay, he re-emphasized that self manifested in various ways. Let's go back to page 62, okay? Selfishness, self-centeredness, that's myself. It's manifested by these 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, self-pity, etc., etc. So we can get some other examples of self if you have the 4th edition, we're going to go to page 263. That's the story He Sold Himself Short. In my book, it's page 292. Let's go there real quick and look at some of these manifestations of self. And I love the end of this story. This is a beautiful story to show us some insight into Alcoholics Anonymous and how these people went through the steps. But anyway, so right here, Dr. Bob led me through all of these steps. First and foremost, Dr. Bob sat there with him across the table, sat there with him and led him through these steps. Okay, he did not give this man a PDF and send him and said, go figure it out. He did not tell him what pages to read in the book and say, go figure it out. He sat there with this man and helped him get through this inventory process. So Dr. Bob led me through all of these steps. At the moral inventory, he brought up some of my personality traits, my bad personality traits, or character defects, such as selfishness, conceit, jealousy, carelessness, intolerance, ill temper, sarcasm, and resentments. We went over these at great length. And then he finally asked me if I wanted these defects of character removed. When I said yes, we both knelt at his desk and prayed, each of us asking to have these defects taken away. Okay, so Dr. Bob is leading this person through this moral inventory. Dr. Bob is bringing up his personality traits. And they give us a few of them. Once again, they're not going to list all 100 character defects. Okay? They want us to get an idea of what the manifestation of self is. And the manifestation of self is my character defects. So I use some of those on that page. There's some other ones I use. I'm not going to go to the 12 and 12, but the people I sponsor, y'all have already been through it. On page 48 on the 12 and 12, they list some more character defects. For lack of a better use of terms, Bill W. called them 7 deadly sins. That was a common term back in the 30s. People understood that these 7 defects that he listed were some big ones. And those were some things that needed to be looked at in a moral inventory. So you guys that have been with me and we've been through the steps, we have a list, all right? We have a list of character defects. We go through these to make sure we understand the definition. What type of pride are we looking for, right? Pride is good, but I'm looking for false pride. What's your definition of false pride? And I have them write it down, because when somebody puts it in their own words, even if they copy it straight from the dictionary, if that's the way they understand it, that's fine too. But as long as the person understands what type of false pride we're going to be looking for. Let's say greed. All right, we get a definition of greed. We get an understanding of what greed looks like to them. And then we go to the next one. We'll go to envy. What is envy? What does envy look like? What's the definition of envy? Okay. And we will go through about 20-something character defects. Some from that story that I just showed you. Some of them are on page 48 of the 12 and 12. And we go through these and we get a good understanding. We do exactly what it says. First, all right, we searched out the flaws in our makeup which caused our failure. Being convinced that self manifested in various ways was what had defeated us, we considered its common manifestations. Awesome. Okay, so now we've got a list of about 20-something character defects. We know that compromises, that's what makes up selfish, self-centered behaviors. Okay? So now out of those, resentment is the number one offender. Okay, we classify that under anger. Anger is in the top 7, man. So resentment is part of this anger. That is our number one offender. It didn't tell us greed was our number one offender. It didn't tell us pride was our number one offender. Even lust is not our number one offender. That comes later. We do an inventory on that. But our number one offender is this anger, is this resentment, this reoccurring anger from things that have happened in the past, and holding on to our anger. That's number one. So that's what we're going to look at first. We're going to look at some anger. And we're going to see how all this ties in here in a minute. So resentment is the number one offender. Out of all of these character defects, out of these 100 forms, okay, of self, resentment's the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. From its stem all forms of spiritual disease. Okay, so when the spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. And I'm going to stop there, guys, before we get into these columns. So the spiritual malady needs to be overcome. Then we straighten out mentally and physically. So let's think about that before next time. Awesome, guys. Take it easy. Talk to you later. Bye.